The warning lights in the detection center had not flashed red in over 300 years. When they finally did, the officers on duty thought it was a system error. They ran diagnostics. They checked the power supply. They even kicked the main console, which was an old habit from the early days of Concordat technology. But the lights kept flashing. Senior Monitor Krelvax stood from his resting platform and walked slowly toward the main display. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the data streaming across the screen. An unregistered vessel had entered Concordat space. This was not unusual. Pirates sometimes wandered into protected territory. Lost traders occasionally took wrong turns near the border nebulas. What was unusual was the ship itself. The vessel moved on fusion drives, primitive fusion drives that burned fuel and expelled hot gas for thrust. Krelvax had seen such engines in museums. No species in the Concordat had used them for at least 10,000 years. The ship was also small, barely larger than a personal transport, and it was leaking radiation in a way that suggested its shielding was either damaged or simply inadequate. "Contact the High Council," Krelvax said quietly. "Tell them we have visitors." 3 hours later, the emergency session of the Galactic Council began in the Great Chambers on Nexus Prime. The chamber was magnificent. It had been built 12,000 years ago when the first 5 species formed the original Concordat. Since then, 42 more species had joined, and the chamber had grown to accommodate them all. Floating platforms held delegates from worlds of ice and worlds of fire, from ocean planets and gas giant moons. Some breathed oxygen, others breathed methane or chlorine. A few did not breathe at all. Ambassador Vethkai of the Siliquans called the session to order. The Siliquans were insectoid beings with shimmering wings and compound eyes that could see in 12 different spectrums. They had brokered peace between warring species for millennia. Their patience was legendary. Their diplomatic skills were unmatched. "We have detected a vessel of unknown origin," Vethkai announced. Her voice was translated instantly into 47 different languages by the chamber's systems. Initial analysis suggests the vessel comes from a previously uncontacted world in the outer territories, a world we have been observing for some time. The display in the center of the chamber flickered to life. It showed a blue and green planet orbiting a medium-sized yellow star. The planet had large oceans, thick clouds, and visible storms swirling across its surface. "This world is designated Observation Target 7741, Vethkai continued. "The dominant species calls their planet Earth and themselves humans." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates pulled up their own data files on this world. The information was not encouraging. "Earth is classified as a Category 3 death world," said technical advisor Molthan of the Vrexian Collective. Molthan was a being of pure energy contained within a mechanical shell. His voice crackled with static electricity. "Surface gravity is crushing. The atmosphere contains a corrosive gas called oxygen. The native life forms are in constant competition for resources. The dominant species evolved as persistent predators who would chase their prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion." "They sound delightful," muttered someone from the back of the chamber. "Their technology is primitive," Molthan continued. "They achieved powered flight only a few hundred years ago by their own calendar. They split the atom and immediately used it to build weapons. They have been to their own moon, but have not yet established permanent colonies beyond their world. By Concordat standards, they are infants." High Arbiter Molveth rose from his platform. He was a Threll, a species of tall, thin beings with silver skin and eyes like pools of liquid mercury. The Threll had been among the founding species of the Concordat. They considered themselves the natural leaders of galactic civilization. "The question before us is simple," Molveth said. "What do we do with these humans?" Standard protocol for primitive species is observation, followed by eventual uplift, once they prove themselves ready for galactic society. However, the fact that they have detected our observation probes and followed them here suggests they may be more resourceful than anticipated. "They followed our probes?" asked Ambassador Yelketh of the Horamni. The Horamni were aquatic beings who attended council sessions in mobile water tanks. "How is that possible?" "Our probes use stealth technology that should be invisible to their detection systems." "We are still investigating that question," Molveth admitted. "But the humans are here now, and they have requested permission to speak with the council." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted over each other in their native languages. Some demanded that the humans be turned away. Others argued that protocol required a formal hearing. A few suggested that the human ship be captured and studied. Vethkai raised her wings for silence. The gesture was universal among concordate species. Slowly, the chamber grew quiet. "We will meet with the humans," she said. "If nothing else, we should learn how they found us. Such resourcefulness, even from primitives, deserves acknowledgement." The human delegation arrived the next morning. There were 3 of them. They wore simple gray uniforms that covered their soft bodies from neck to ankle. They walked upright on 2 legs, which was common enough among concordate species. Their faces had 2 eyes, 1 nose, and 1 mouth, which was also fairly standard. But there was something unsettling about the way they moved. They walked with a confidence that seemed out of place for beings who had never left their own solar system before. The leader of the delegation was a woman named Captain Yuna Okonkwo. She had dark skin, short hair, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Beside her walked Dr. Samuel Reyes, a scientist with gray hair and a calm expression. The third human was younger, a communications officer named Lieutenant Park. Captain Okonkwo stopped in the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled delegates. She did not seem intimidated by the vast space or the dozens of alien species staring down at her. If anything, she seemed curious. "Thank you for receiving us," she said. Her voice was clear and steady. "We know our arrival was unexpected. We apologize for any concern we may have caused." High Arbiter Mulvith leaned forward on his platform. "You found our observation probes," he said. "You reverse-engineered their navigation systems and followed them across hundreds of light years. You did this with technology that by all rights should not have been capable of such a journey." "How?" Captain Okonkwo smiled. It was a small smile, polite but not apologetic. "Humans are curious by nature," she said. "When we discovered that we were being watched, we wanted to know by whom. Your probes were well hidden, but nothing stays hidden forever. Once we found one, we studied it. Once we studied it, we learned. Once we learned, we followed. Your ship nearly fell apart during the journey," Technical Advisor Mull then observed. "Your radiation shielding was insufficient. Your life support systems were operating beyond safe parameters. Several of your crew members received doses of cosmic radiation that would be fatal to most concordate species. We survived," Captain Okonkwo said simply. Ambassador Vethkai spread her wings slightly. "We admire your determination, Captain. However, the Concordat has protocols for contact with new species. These protocols exist for good reason. Young civilizations must be guided carefully into galactic society. There are rules to follow, steps to take. You cannot simply arrive at our doorstep and expect full membership." "We are not asking for membership," Dr. Reyes said. He stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "We are asking for conversation. We have questions about this concordat of yours. Many questions. You will have time for questions during the integration process," Mulvith said. "For now, you will be assigned quarters and given access to basic orientation materials. In time, perhaps a few generations, your species may be ready for a more significant role." "A few generations," Captain Okonkwo repeated. She did not sound pleased. "Patience is a virtue in galactic affairs," Mulvith said. "Your species is young. You have much to learn." "I see." Captain Okonkwo looked at her colleagues, then back at the council. "And what category have you assigned to humanity?" "I noticed your classification systems in the probe data. Every species gets a number, a ranking, a place in the hierarchy." Mulvith hesitated for a moment. Then he straightened his silver shoulders and spoke with the full authority of his office. "Humanity has been designated Category 7, primitive but manageable. You will be observed, guided, and eventually elevated to whatever status your development warrants." Captain Okonkwo nodded slowly. Her expression did not change, but something shifted behind her eyes, something that made several of the more perceptive delegates feel suddenly uncomfortable. "Category 7, she said. "Primitive but manageable. I will remember that, High Arbiter. I suspect we all will." The delegation was escorted from the chamber. The council returned to other business, and the warning lights in the detection center finally stopped flashing. But somehow, despite the return to normal operations, many delegates found themselves unable to shake a strange feeling. a feeling that something had changed, that the universe had shifted slightly on its axis. They told themselves it was nothing. Just nerves, just the natural discomfort of encountering something new. They told themselves that everything was under control. They were wrong. The quarters assigned to the human delegation were comfortable by concordate standards. The rooms were spacious, the temperature was adjustable, and the food synthesizers had been programmed with Earth-compatible nutrition profiles. The orientation materials were extensive, covering everything from concordate history to trade regulations to proper diplomatic etiquette. The humans read all of it. Every word, every footnote, every appendix. Then they started asking questions. Ambassador Vethkai received the first request for clarification on the third day of the human visit. Dr. Samuel Reyes wanted to discuss something he had found in the historical archives. Vethkai agreed to meet with him, expecting a simple conversation about cultural differences or translation errors. She was not prepared for what happened next. "I have been studying the records of species integration," Dr. Reyes said. He sat across from Vethkai in her private office, a data tablet in his hands. "The Concordat has welcomed 47 species into its membership over the past 12,000 years. This is impressive. However, I noticed something curious." "What did you notice?" Vethkai asked politely. 3 species are listed as protectorates rather than full members: the Yelmari, the Kreth, and the Orvani. According to the records, they were granted protectorate status for their own benefit, to shield them from the complexities of galactic politics until they were ready for full participation. That is correct. Some species require more time to adapt, but these species have been protectorates for over 4,000 years, Dr. Reyes said. And in that time, their populations have declined by an average of 80%. Their homeworlds have been strip-mined for resources. Their young are taken to serve in Concordat institutions, supposedly for education, and most never return home. The records call this protection, but it looks more like slow extinction to me. Vethkai's wings twitched. This was an involuntary response among Siliquans, a sign of discomfort that she could not fully control. "The situation with the protectorate species is complex," she said carefully. "There are historical factors that outsiders may not fully understand." "Then, help me understand." Dr. Reyes leaned forward. His eyes were steady, patient, but utterly relentless. "Because I also found references to something called the Kethra hegemony. They appear in records from about 6,000 years ago, and then they simply vanish. No explanation, no memorial, just silence." "What happened to the Kethra?" "The Kethra were unfortunate," Vethkai said. "They refused to accept Concordat guidance. They became aggressive, threatening. The Council was forced to take action for the safety of all." "What kind of action?" Vethkai did not answer. She did not need to. The silence said everything. Dr. Reyes nodded slowly. He made a note on his data tablet and stood to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back. "One more question, Ambassador. The Concordat describes itself as a peace council, a gathering of species united for mutual benefit, but I have seen your fleet specifications. You have over 2,000 warships stationed throughout your territory, battle cruisers, destroyers, orbital bombardment platforms. Why does a peace council need such weapons?" "The galaxy is dangerous," Vethkai said. "There are threats beyond our borders, pirates, rogues, species that refuse the benefits of civilization. The fleet exists for defense." "For defense," Dr. Reyes repeated. "Of course. Thank you for your time, Ambassador." He left. Vethkai sat alone in her office for a long time, staring at the door through which he had departed. Her wings would not stop twitching. The questions continued over the following weeks. Captain Okonkwo requested access to trade records. She discovered that young species were required to sell their resources at fixed prices to elder species, prices that had not been adjusted in millennia. The elder species then resold those resources at massive profits to outside buyers. It was exploitation dressed up as mentorship. Lieutenant Park examined the legal archives. He found that young species had almost no representation on the council. Their votes counted for less. Their complaints were routed through endless bureaucratic channels. Cases of elder species violating the rights of younger species were quietly dismissed or buried in procedural delays. Dr. Reyes continued his historical research. He documented 17 species that had been declared threats to galactic peace. and subsequently destroyed or enslaved. In every case, the threat designation came shortly after the species questioned concordate authority or demanded equal treatment. The humans compiled their findings into a comprehensive report. They requested a formal audience with the full council to present their conclusions. High Arbiter Molveth was not pleased, but protocol required that any species, even a primitive one, be allowed to address the council on matters of importance. He could not refuse without appearing to violate the very principles the Concordate claimed to uphold. The audience was scheduled for the following morning. The chamber was full when the humans arrived. Word had spread that the newcomers intended to challenge the council, and many delegates came out of curiosity. Others came hoping to see the primitives embarrass themselves. A few came because they suspected that something important was about to happen. Captain Okonkwo stood in the center of the chamber, flanked by Dr. Reyes and Lieutenant Park. She waited for silence before she began to speak. "We have spent 4 weeks studying your concordate," she said. "We have read your histories, examined your laws, and analyzed your economic systems. We came here hoping to find partners, allies, perhaps even friends. Instead, we found something else." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates. "We found an empire." The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. High Arbiter Molveth's silver face remained expressionless, but his eyes had hardened. "The Concordate presents itself as a gathering of equals," Captain Okonkwo continued. "But it is not. It is a hierarchy in which a handful of elder species control all significant decisions. Young species are exploited for their resources and their labor. Those who question this arrangement are silenced or destroyed. The protectorate species are not being protected, they are being slowly erased. And the species that came before them, the Kethra and others, were erased much faster. These are serious accusations," High Arbiter Molveth said. His voice was cold. "Do you have evidence to support them?" "We have your own records," Dr. Reyes said. He activated his data tablet, and the chamber's display systems came to life. Charts and documents appeared in the air, visible to all. Population decline curves, trade imbalance statistics, legal case dismissal rates. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "This data proves nothing," Molveth said. "You are newcomers. You do not understand the context, the complexities, the historical necessities. We understand more than you think," Captain Okonkwo said. "We understand because we have seen this before, on our own world. In our own history, humans have built empires exactly like this one. We called them civilizing missions, protective custody, benevolent guidance. We told ourselves that we were helping the people we conquered. We were wrong, and eventually, painfully, we learned to do better." She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. "The Concordate is not peace, it is control. It is not cooperation. It is domination dressed in diplomatic language, and we will not be part of it. Not as Category 7 primitives waiting for your permission to exist. Not as protectorates being slowly ground into extinction. Not as threats to be eliminated when we become inconvenient." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted protests and demands. Some called for the humans to be arrested. Others called for their immediate expulsion from Concordat space. Ambassador Vethkai raised her wings for silence. It took longer this time. The anger in the chamber was real and deep, but eventually, the noise subsided. "What do you want, Captain?" Vethkai asked. Her voice was tired. She already knew that whatever happened next would not be simple. "We want change," Captain Okonkwo said. "Real representation for all species, fair economic practices, accountability for past crimes, protection that actually protects instead of slowly destroys. These demands are unreasonable," Molveth said. "The Concordat has functioned for 12,000 years. We cannot reshape our entire civilization because a group of primitives disapproves of our methods." Captain Okonkwo nodded slowly. She did not seem surprised by the response. "Then we will leave," she said. "We will return to our own space. We will build our own alliances with species who share our values, and we will be ready when the Concordat decides that our existence is a threat to galactic peace. Because we have read your histories, High Arbiter. We know what happens to species that refuse to submit, and we have no intention of being another name erased from the records." She turned and walked toward the chamber exit. Dr. Reyes and Lieutenant Park followed her. At the door, she paused and looked back one final time. "We have seen empires like this before," she said quietly. "We were empires like this before. And every empire, no matter how powerful, eventually falls. The only question is whether it chooses to change before the fall, or whether it is dragged down by the weight of its own sins." The door closed behind her. The chamber remained silent for a long time. High Arbiter Molveth dismissed the session without further discussion. He retired to his private quarters and did not emerge for the rest of the day. Ambassador Vethkai returned to her office and stared at the wall for hours, thinking about things she had tried very hard not to think about for a very long time. And in the guest quarters, the human delegation packed their belongings and prepared their ship for the long journey home. They had said what they came to say. Now they would wait to see what happened next. They did not have to wait long. The Vexari struck without warning. Their ships emerged from hyperspace in the middle of the night cycle, when most Concordat monitoring stations were running on minimal crew. The border world of Telex 4 was hit first. 3 million citizens were asleep when the orbital bombardment began. By the time they woke, their cities were burning. News of the attack reached Nexus Prime within hours. Emergency sessions were called. Fleet commanders were summoned from their posts. High Arbiter Molveth stood before the council with a face as gray as ash. "The Vexari Dominion has declared war on the Concordat," he announced. "Their fleet consists of approximately 300 warships. They have already captured 2 border worlds and are advancing toward the inner territories. Current projections suggest they will reach the core systems within 3 weeks." The chamber descended into chaos. Delegates shouted questions and accusations. Some demanded immediate counterattacks. Others called for evacuation of endangered worlds. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. The Vexari had been expelled from the Concordat 600 years ago. They were a reptilian species, cold-blooded in more ways than one. Their culture valued strength above all else. They had chafed under Concordat restrictions, demanded greater power, and ultimately been driven out in a conflict that cost millions of lives. For centuries, they had rebuilt their strength beyond the borders. And now they had returned. "Our fleet is mobilizing," Molveth continued. "We have numerical superiority, 2,000 ships against their 300. However, our vessels have not engaged in genuine combat operations in over 2,000 years. Our crews are trained for patrol duty and intimidation, not warfare. The Vexari, by contrast, have been fighting for 6 centuries. They know nothing but war." The implications hung heavy in the air. Numbers would not be enough. Experience would decide this conflict, and the Concordat had none. Ambassador Vethkai raised her wings for attention. "What of our allies? The species beyond our borders who have trade agreements with us? Can they not provide assistance?" "We have sent requests," Molveth said. "Most have declined. Some have cited neutrality. Others have expressed concern about Concordat policies." He paused, and something bitter crossed his face. "It seems our reputation precedes us. Many potential allies view the Concordat with suspicion. They see us as exploiters rather than partners. They have no interest in dying to preserve our dominion." The irony was not lost on anyone. The very practices that had made the Concordat powerful had also made it alone. There would be no outside help. They would have to save themselves. It was technical advisor Mole, then, who raised the obvious question. "What about the humans?" Silence fell over the chamber. Every eye turned toward Molveth. "The humans," the High Arbiter said slowly, "departed Concordat space 3 weeks ago. They made it clear that they wanted nothing to do with our civilization. But they have ships," Mole then pressed. "Their technology may be primitive, but they reached us across hundreds of light years. They are resourceful, and from what I recall of their history files, they have considerable experience with warfare. We cannot ask for help from a species we classified as primitives," protested one of the Threll delegates. "It would be humiliating. It would undermine our authority. Our authority will be meaningless if we are conquered," Mole then replied. "Dead empires have no dignity to protect." The debate continued for hours. Pride warred with pragmatism. Fear of the Vexari competed with fear of appearing weak before the newcomers. In the end, desperation won. A message was sent to the human vessel before it could leave Concordat communication range. The message was simple and direct. The Concordat faced an existential threat. Any assistance would be welcomed. and remembered. The response came within the hour. We are coming back. The human ship returned to Nexus Prime 12 days later. By then, the situation had deteriorated badly. 3 more worlds had fallen. The Vexari fleet was sweeping through the border territories like fire through dry grass. Concordat ships sent to stop them were being destroyed with embarrassing ease. Captain Okonkwo and her crew were brought directly to the War Council. The chamber was full of military commanders, strategic advisors, and frightened politicians. Maps of the conflict zone covered every display surface. Red markers showed Vexari advances. Blue markers showed Concordat positions. There was far too much red and far too little blue. "Thank you for returning, High Arbiter," Mulvith said. The words seemed to cost him physical pain. "We find ourselves in need of assistance." "I can see that," Captain Okonkwo said. She studied the tactical displays with narrowed eyes. "Your fleet has the numbers, but you are being outmaneuvered at every turn. The Vexari are using standard aggressive doctrine. Rapid strikes, concentrated force, psychological warfare. Your commanders do not know how to respond." "Our commanders are well trained," Fleet Admiral Vrextal objected. He was an elderly thrall with medals covering his chest. "They follow established protocols. Your protocols were designed for police actions, not war," Captain Okonkwo said. "You are trying to maintain formation and minimize casualties. The Vexari are trying to win. Those are very different goals." She turned to face the council directly. "We have 12 ships. 12 small, primitive vessels with crude weapons and inadequate shielding. We cannot win this war for you. But we can show you how to fight it." "How?" Mulvith asked. "By doing what humans have always done. By being creative. By being unpredictable. By being willing to do things that civilized species consider unthinkable." Captain Okonkwo's voice was steady, but there was something hard beneath the surface, something that had been forged in millennia of conflict. "We are not stronger than the Vexari. We are not more advanced than you. But we have one advantage that no species in this quadrant seems to possess." "What advantage is that?" "Experience." Captain Okonkwo stepped toward the tactical display and began pointing at key positions. "Humans have been fighting wars since before we developed written language. We have refined the art of killing over countless generations. We have invented weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering. We have committed atrocities against our own kind that would horrify every species in this chamber. And we have learned from all of it. Every mistake, every failure, every victory bought with blood." She looked around at the assembled commanders. "We know war. We hate it. We wish we did not know it. But we do. And right now that knowledge is the only thing that might save your civilization." The room was silent. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. Others looked intrigued. Fleet Admiral Vrextal looked skeptical but desperate. "What would you have us do?" Mulvith asked quietly. "Give us tactical command of your frontline forces. Not the whole fleet, just the ships facing the Vexari advance. Let us show your crews how to fight like humans. And let us lead the counterattack." "You would put yourselves in danger?" Captain Okonkwo smiled. It was not a warm smile. "High Arbiter, humans have been putting themselves in danger since the first of our ancestors climbed down from the trees and decided to chase predators instead of running from them. We chased them until they collapsed. We ran them down over miles and miles of open ground, never stopping, never slowing, until they were too exhausted to fight back. That is what we are. Persistence predators. We do not stop, we do not quit. And when we decide that something needs to die, we find a way to make it happen." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The Vexari think they are warriors. They think they understand violence. They have no idea what they are facing. But they will learn. We will teach them." Fleet Admiral Vrextal rose from his seat. He was old, but his eyes were sharp, and he had spent enough years studying military history to recognize something genuine when he saw it. "I will grant you tactical command of the Third Fleet," he said. 40 ships, currently positioned near Keithnar Station. The Vexari are expected to attack that position within the week. If you can hold it, you will have proven yourselves. If you fail, we will not fail," Captain Okonkwo said simply. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her crew following behind her. At the door, she paused and looked back. "One more thing, High Arbiter. When this is over, when the Vexari are defeated and your worlds are safe, We are going to have another conversation about the future of this Concordat. A serious conversation. And you are going to listen." She left before Molveth could respond. The High Arbiter sat in his chair for a long time, staring at the door through which the humans had departed. He had invited something into his civilization that he did not fully understand. Something dangerous. Something that did not fear him or respect his authority. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake, but the alternative was annihilation. And faced with that choice, even pride had to bend. The war had begun, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what millions of years of evolution on a death world could produce when properly motivated. The Vexari had no idea what was coming for them. Keithnar Station hung in the darkness of space like a jewel against black velvet. It was massive, home to nearly 1 million souls and the central supply hub for the entire western sector. Whoever controlled Keithnar controlled the flow of resources to a dozen worlds. The Vexari knew this. That was why they were coming. Captain Okonkwo stood on the bridge of her ship, the Perseverance, and studied the tactical display. 40 Concordat vessels surrounded her. They were large and impressive, bristling with weapons that had never been fired in anger. Their crews were disciplined and well-trained, but they moved with the caution of beings who had never truly faced death. The 12 human ships were scattered among them. They were smaller, cruder, patched together from salvage and determination. But their crews had been trained differently. They had run combat simulations since childhood. They had studied every war in human history. They knew what was coming, and they were ready. Vexari fleet approaching, Lieutenant Park reported. 93 vessels. They will be in weapon range in 4 hours. Almost 3 to 1, Dr. Reyes observed. He was not a military man, but he had insisted on staying with the fleet. Someone needed to document what was about to happen. "The odds are irrelevant," Captain Okonkwo said. "Wars are not won by counting ships. They are won by breaking the enemy's will to fight. The Vexari expect us to behave like every other Concordat force they have faced. Defensive formations, cautious engagements, orderly retreats. We are going to do something different." She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All vessels, this is Captain Okonkwo. In a few hours, we will engage the enemy. I know many of you have never been in combat before. I know you are afraid. Fear is natural. Fear is healthy. It means you understand what is at stake. But fear cannot control you. Fear must serve you. It must sharpen your mind and steady your hands. The Vexari think we are soft. They think we are weak. They are wrong. Today we prove them wrong." She paused, letting the words settle into the hearts of beings from a dozen different worlds. "Follow my orders exactly, trust the plan, and when the shooting starts, remember one thing. We are not here to survive. We are here to win." Okonkwo out. The channel closed. The fleet waited, and the Vexari drew closer. The battle began at 0347 station time. The Vexari commander was named Thraxvar. He was a veteran of countless engagements, and he expected this fight to follow the familiar pattern. The Concordat ships would form a defensive sphere around the station. His fleet would hammer them with long-range fire until their formation cracked. Then his assault ships would push through and capture the station. It would be over within hours. The first sign that something was wrong came when 3 Concordat vessels broke formation and charged directly at his fleet. "What are they doing?" Thraxvar demanded. "Have they lost their minds?" The 3 ships were human. They accelerated far beyond safe limits, their engines burning so hot they left trails of plasma in their wake. They drove straight into the heart of the Vexari formation, firing everything they had. Vexari gunners returned fire. One human ship took a direct hit and began venting atmosphere. Another lost its main engine and started spinning. But they did not retreat. They did not slow down. They kept coming. The damaged ship, the one venting atmosphere, adjusted its course. It aimed itself at the largest Vexari carrier and increased speed. "They are going to ram us," someone shouted over the tactical channel. "The primitives are going to ram us." The carrier tried to evade, but it was too large, too slow. The human ship struck it amidships at full velocity. The explosion was visible from Keithnar Station, a flower of fire blooming in the darkness. Both ships were destroyed. The carrier broke apart, taking 400 Vexari crew with it. The human vessel ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. Thraxvar stared at the wreckage in disbelief. "They killed themselves," he said. "They flew into us and killed themselves. No concordate species had ever done such a thing. No sane being would choose death over retreat." But the humans had not hesitated. They had seen an opportunity to hurt the enemy, and they had taken it without a moment's pause. Before Thrax Var could process what had happened, the main Concordat fleet attacked. They came from 3 directions at once, splitting their forces in ways that violated every tactical doctrine the Vexari had studied. Some ships targeted engines, trying to disable rather than destroy. Others went for weapon systems. A few made suicide runs of their own, though none of them completed the maneuver. Concordate crews were not yet ready to die so readily, but the human ships were. Another human vessel, its shields failing, drove itself into a Vexari destroyer. A third rammed a cruiser that was threatening the station. The Vexari fleet began to panic. They were warriors, bred for battle, but they had never faced an enemy that did not fear death. It was unnatural. It was terrifying. Captain Okonkwo directed the battle from the Perseverance. She moved her ships like chess pieces, exploiting gaps in the Vexari formation, concentrating fire on damaged vessels, refusing to let the enemy regroup. When Concordate captains hesitated, she pushed them forward. When they wanted to retreat, she found them new targets. The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, the Vexari had lost 41 ships. The Concordat had lost 15. Kithnar Station was intact. Thrax Var ordered his remaining forces to withdraw. He had expected an easy victory. Instead, he had walked into a nightmare. As the Vexari fleet retreated, something unexpected happened. Concordat medical vessels moved into the debris field. They began rescuing survivors from destroyed ships, both their own and the enemy's. Vexari warriors who had expected to die in the cold of space found themselves being pulled from wreckage by beings they had been trying to kill hours earlier. Captain Okonkwo personally oversaw the rescue of a Vexari escape pod. Inside were 3 officers, including a young lieutenant who had lost an arm in the explosion that destroyed her ship. She looked up at the human captain with confusion and fear. "Why?" she asked. "We are your enemies. Why save us?" Okonkwo crouched beside the wounded officer. Her face was tired, streaked with sweat and stress, but her voice was gentle. "Because the fight is over," she said. "Because you are not a threat anymore. And because how you treat the defeated determines what kind of peace you get. I do not understand." "You will." Okonkwo stood and gestured to the medical team. "Get her to the infirmary. Treat her wounds. Make her comfortable." Dr. Reyes watched the exchange with quiet fascination. He had seen human soldiers do terrible things in the heat of battle. He had also seen them show extraordinary compassion to fallen enemies once the fighting stopped. It was a contradiction that defined his species. "The Concordat officers are confused," he said to Okonkwo as they walked through the damaged corridors of the station. "They expected us to execute the prisoners or at least abuse them. They do not understand why we are being kind. That is because they do not understand war." Okonkwo replied, "Real war. War that ends. The Vexari were expelled 600 years ago, and the hate has been festering ever since. Nobody ever tried to make peace. Nobody ever tried to understand why they were so angry. The Concordat just pushed them out and forgot about them until they came back with guns." She stopped and faced Dr. Reyes directly. "If we slaughter their prisoners, we become monsters to them. They will never stop fighting. Their children will grow up hating us. Their grandchildren will plan revenge. The war will never end. But if we show them mercy, if we treat them with dignity even after they try to destroy us, we plant a seed. Maybe it grows, maybe it does not, but it is the only chance for real peace. You think the Vexari can be redeemed? I think everyone can be redeemed. We are living proof of that." Okonkwo resumed walking. "Humans used to own other humans. We built empires on slavery and conquest. We nearly destroyed our own planet with pollution and war. And somehow, despite all of that, we found our way to something better. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. If we can change, anyone can." The Concordat commanders did not understand. The Threll admirals were baffled. The politicians on Nexus Prime were outraged that precious medical resources were being wasted on enemy prisoners. But the Vexari soldiers in those prison wards began to talk. They talked to each other about the strange beings who had fought like demons and then healed like angels. They talked about the human captain who looked at them with sadness instead of hate. They talked about the medics who brought them food and asked about their families. And slowly, very slowly, something began to shift. Word reached Thraxvar that his captured soldiers were being treated well. He did not believe it at first. It had to be a trick, some kind of psychological warfare. But the reports kept coming, and eventually he could not deny the truth. The humans were nothing like the Concordat. They were nothing like the Vexari. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Warriors who chose mercy, conquerors who refused to conquer, monsters who somehow remembered how to be human. Thraxvar did not know what to do with that information, but it haunted him. It haunted all of them. The war was not over yet. But for the first time since the Vexari had been expelled, there was a possibility of something other than endless conflict, a possibility of peace. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Keithnar Station. The Vexari Dominion had sued for peace 3 months after their initial defeat. Their fleet had been shattered in a series of engagements that the Concordat military scholars were already calling revolutionary. Human tactics had transformed the war from a desperate defense into a calculated dismantling of enemy power. By the end, the Vexari had lost over 200 ships and most of their offensive capability. But it was not the military defeats that broke the Vexari will to fight. It was something else entirely. It was the mercy. Every prisoner taken by human-led forces was treated with dignity. Wounded enemies were healed. Captured soldiers were fed, housed, and eventually returned home. The humans made no demands for revenge, no calls for punishment. They simply won their battles and then extended their hands. The Vexari did not know how to respond to this. Their entire culture was built on the assumption that the strong dominated the weak. Mercy was weakness. Compassion was foolishness. And yet these humans, who had proven themselves the deadliest warriors in the sector, kept choosing to be kind. It was confusing. It was unsettling. And eventually, it was persuasive. When the Vexari commander Thraxvar finally requested peace talks, he made one specific demand. The humans must be present at the negotiations. He would not speak to the Concordat alone. He did not trust them. But somehow, impossibly, he had come to trust the primitives who had destroyed his fleet. The peace conference was held on Nexus Prime, in the same great chamber where Captain Okonkwo had first addressed the council months earlier. The room was filled with delegates from every Concordat species. Vexari representatives sat on one side, their scales gleaming under the chamber lights. High Arbiter Molvith presided over the proceedings, though his authority felt diminished somehow, smaller than it had been before. Captain Okonkwo stood in the center, exactly where she had stood when she first called the Concordat an empire. "We are here to end a war," she said. "But more than that, we are here to address the reasons the war started in the first place. If we do not, this peace will fail. The Vexari will rebuild. The hatred will return. And in another few centuries, we will be right back where we started." Thraxvar shifted in his seat. His warriors had told him about this human, about her fierce eyes and gentle hands. Seeing her now, he understood what they meant. "The Concordat expelled my people 600 years ago," he said. His voice was rough, damaged by decades of breathing the thin air of exile worlds. "They called us aggressors, threats to peace. But the truth was simpler. We demanded equality. We demanded respect. We refused to be treated as lesser beings. And for that crime, we were cast out." The Vexari were violent. Molvith objected. They attacked Concordat citizens. They destroyed property. They threatened civil war. "We defended ourselves," Thraxvar shot back. "Your economic policies were strangling our world. Your quotas prevented our population from growing. Your restrictions kept our technology primitive, while your elder species built fleets and fortunes. We asked for fairness. You gave us chains. So yes, we fought, and we lost. And we spent 6 centuries in the darkness, nursing our wounds and planning our revenge." The chamber was silent. Many delegates had never heard the Vexari perspective. They had been taught that the reptilian species was simply aggressive by nature, incapable of civilization. The idea that they had legitimate grievances was uncomfortable. Captain Okonkwo let the silence stretch before she spoke again. "The Vexari are not blameless. They have killed innocents. They have destroyed worlds. They have committed atrocities that cannot be forgiven. But they did not become what they are in a vacuum. They were pushed. They were excluded. They were told that they did not matter. And when beings are treated like monsters long enough, some of them become monsters. She turned to face the council directly. This is not just about the Vexari. This is about the Concordat itself. About the way you treat young species. About the protectorates who are being slowly exterminated. About the voices that are silenced and the questions that are punished. If you want lasting peace, you need lasting change. Real representation for all species. Fair economic practices. Accountability for past crimes. Protection that actually protects instead of slowly destroys. You are asking us to dismantle our civilization, Molveth said. His voice was cold, but there was something beneath it now. Something that might have been fear. I am asking you to save it. Okonkwo stepped toward the High Arbiter's platform. The Concordat has lasted 12,000 years. That is impressive, but it has survived through control, not consent. Through fear, not respect. That kind of power is fragile. Sooner or later, it breaks. The Vexari almost broke it. The next threat might succeed. She gestured toward the human ships visible through the chamber's great windows. We came to you with 12 vessels. 12 primitive, barely functional ships held together with hope and determination. And with those 12 ships, we changed the course of a war. We did not do this through superior technology or greater numbers. We did it because we understood something that the Concordat has forgotten. What have we forgotten? Ambassador Vethkai asked quietly. That strength is not about domination. It is about connection. It is about building others up instead of pushing them down. It is about creating allies who fight beside you because they believe in what you represent, not because they fear what you might do to them. Okonkwo turned to face Thraxvar. The Vexari have done terrible things. They must face consequences for their actions. But those consequences should be repair, not revenge. Restitution, not destruction. We propose that the Vexari be reintegrated into the Concordat with full membership rights. In exchange, they will contribute to the rebuilding of the worlds they damaged. They will work alongside the species they once fought. And over time, perhaps over generations, the wounds will heal. Thraxvar stared at her. No one had ever offered the Vexari a path back before. No one had ever suggested that redemption was possible. Why would you do this for us? He asked. We tried to destroy you. We killed your people, because we have been where you are. Okonkwo said simply. Humans have been the monsters of our own world. We have committed genocides and started wars and nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen different ways. We know what it means to be hated, and we know what it means to be given a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even you. The vote was called 3 hours later. The results were not unanimous. Many elder species opposed the reforms. They saw their power slipping away and fought to preserve it. But the younger species, the ones who had lived under Concordat restrictions for millennia, voted overwhelmingly in favor of change. The protectorates would be elevated to full membership. Economic policies would be restructured to ensure fairness. The Vexari would be reintegrated, under supervision, with a path toward full restoration of their rights. And humanity would be granted a permanent seat on the council, not because of their technology or their military power, but because of their perspective, because they had shown the galaxy a different way of being. After the vote, Ambassador Vethkai approached Captain Okonkwo in the corridor outside the chamber. The old Silikwan moved slowly, her wings folded close to her body. You have changed everything, she said. The Concordat will never be the same. I hope not, Okonkwo replied. The old Concordat was killing you. Slowly, quietly, but surely. This new version has a chance to survive, maybe even to thrive. What do humans want from all of this? Power? Resources? Territory? Okonkwo smiled. It was a tired smile, the expression of someone who had been fighting for a long time and was finally allowed to rest. Same thing everyone wants, Ambassador. A place at the table, a chance to help, maybe some friends. She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning around its yellow sun. A small blue world, fragile and fierce, home to a species that had nearly destroyed itself 100 times and somehow kept finding reasons to hope. We have been alone for a long time, she said quietly, surrounded by stars but convinced we were the only ones who mattered. It made us small, it made us scared. But now we know we are not alone. And instead of being afraid, We are excited. There is so much to learn, so much to build, so much to discover. She turned back to Vethkai. The galaxy is bigger than any of us imagined, and we want to be part of it, not as conquerors, not as primitives waiting to be managed, just as partners, equals, members of something larger than ourselves. Vethkai's wings rustled softly. It was the Siliquan equivalent of a sigh. You are strange creatures, Captain. Terrifying and gentle, brutal and kind. I do not fully understand you. Perhaps no one ever will. That is all right, Okonkwo said. We do not fully understand ourselves, but we are trying to be better. Every day, we are trying. She extended her hand. Vethkai looked at it for a moment, then reached out with one of her delicate limbs and touched Okonkwo's palm. It was a small gesture, simple, almost meaningless, but it was a beginning. And in a galaxy that had known too much fear and too little hope, beginnings were precious things. The human ships departed Nexus Prime a week later, carrying ambassadors from 12 different species who had asked to visit Earth. They wanted to see this death world for themselves. They wanted to meet the beings who had emerged from its crushing gravity and burning skies. They wanted to understand how monsters had learned to become something else. And as the ships vanished into the vastness of space, the Galactic Council looked toward the future and wondered what other surprises the universe had in store. For the first time in 12,000 years, they were genuinely curious. And that, perhaps, was the greatest gift humanity had given them, the gift of wonder.